My name is Marcus Ramirez. They laughed when I delivered weed to make ends meet. They called me a failure, a joke, the black sheep of the family. But when their perfect lives collapsed, I was the only one left standing, because while they watched me fall, I was busy building the future they'd soon depend on. Please subscribe for more exciting family betrayal stories. Also, like to keep the channel growing. Welcome back to the story. I wasn't just the youngest. I was the mistake they never let me forget. Growing up in East Oakland, in a tight 2-bedroom on 57th Avenue, the air always felt thick with judgment. Our house was small, loud, and full of expectations, ones that never seemed meant for me. Javier, my older brother, was the golden child. He had the grades, the trophies, the charm. Teachers adored him, neighbors praised him, and my parents treated him like the second coming of Cesar Chavez. He got straight A's from day one and somehow made even piano lessons seem heroic. Then there was Marisol. My sister was smart, beautiful, and poised. She spoke fluent Spanish by age 6 and won the district-wide spelling bee at 8. My mom used to beam at her like she'd birthed a miracle. Marisol got away with anything because she had potential. And me? I was just Marcus, the accident. That's what my mom whispered once when she thought I wasn't listening. She was on the phone with my tia Lupe, complaining about how hard it was with 3 kids. Marcus wasn't planned, she said. He just kind of happened. Like a stain on a white shirt. I spent my childhood tripping over my siblings' shadows. Every report card felt like a disappointment before it was even opened. See in math again? My dad would say, rubbing his temples like I just torched the family name. Javier would help, sure, but with a smug little smirk. It's not that hard, bro. Just study more. As if effort was the problem. No one saw how I stayed up late trying. How I'd read the same paragraph 5 times and still not get it. I remember once, I must have been 12, I brought home a drawing I'd done in art class. It was a sketch of our house, with the cracked driveway and crooked fence. I gave it to my mom while she was folding laundry. She didn't even look up. Just said, "That's nice, Mijo. Can you take the trash out?" I taped it to my bedroom wall and stared at it for months. Eventually, it curled at the corners and faded, just like the pride I'd felt showing it to her. By the time I hit high school, I'd stopped trying to win their attention. I got a job at a corner store stocking shelves, then started running deliveries for a local cannabis guy. Not legal yet, but the money was better than flipping burgers. My parents didn't ask where I was going anymore. They just rolled their eyes when I walked in late or smelled like weed. "Don't be like your uncle," my dad said once, shaking his head. Always chasing money, never amounting to anything. But I was listening. I remembered that. Because even if they never saw me, I was watching all of them, every judgment, every cold shoulder, every laugh at my expense. And I was learning exactly how to build a future they'd never see coming. They wore success like armor. And me? I was the punchline. Family gatherings were the worst. Always at my mom's place in Fruitvale, where the smell of arroz con pollo and freshly warmed tortillas filled the air, but the warmth never quite reached me. Everyone would arrive smiling, dressed sharp, and pretending nothing in the world was wrong, especially with Javier and Marisol leading the parade. Javier would pull up in whatever new car his startup had funded that quarter, Tesla, Benz, once even a matte black Porsche. He'd walk in holding a bottle of wine he couldn't pronounce and kiss our mother's cheek like he hadn't forgotten her birthday 3 years in a row. "You still delivering, bro?" He'd ask me across the table with that fake friendly tone. "Gotta respect the grind, man. DoorDash or one of those new weed apps?" He always made sure everyone heard. Marisol, meanwhile, came with her perfect hair, her designer handbag, and her husband, Dr. Aiden Patel, the human LinkedIn profile. She'd give me a hug like I was a charity case, ask how I was doing, then pivot straight to stories about yoga retreats in Carmel or Aiden's hospital promotion. I'd sit there, chewing too fast, pretending not to care while they all nodded and clapped and laughed at each other's curated lives. Everything about them screamed polished. But the worst part? My parents fed into it. Your brother's company just hit $1 million in valuation, Mom would beam. You should ask him for advice. Marisol's thinking of getting a second house in San Jose, Dad would add, not once asking if I could pay my own rent that month. Nobody ever asked me about my goals. Nobody wanted to hear about how I was learning about house flipping or how I'd started attending late-night real estate webinars. They weren't interested in things that didn't sound like prestige. To them, success meant degrees and white-collar titles. Not street smarts or hustle. Not building something from nothing. Even when I got my first small property, a beat-up duplex in Richmond, nobody batted an eye. I brought it up once at dinner. Bought a place last week, I said. Javier didn't even look up from his phone. With what? Monopoly money? Everyone laughed. Even my mom. That's when it really hit me. I wasn't just overlooked. I was the family clown. The lovable loser. The one they expected to stay stuck so they could feel better about themselves. But the thing about being the punchline, it gives you a front row seat to everyone's blind spots. And while they were busy performing perfection, I was studying their cracks, waiting for the moment their golden glow would fade. Because one thing I knew, deep in my gut, even gold can tarnish. And I'd be ready when it did. They saw a weed runner. I saw opportunity. The thing about being underestimated is, no one's watching you win. While Javier was posing with his co-founders on LinkedIn and Marisol was posting filtered brunch photos from Napa, I was loading up my beat-up Corolla with weed deliveries in East and West Oakland. Cash tips paid my phone bill. The rest I stacked. I was never proud of the work itself, but I respected the hustle. I was on the road most nights, pulling 12-hour shifts for a cannabis startup operating in a legal gray area. Sketchy at times, yeah? But it taught me more about people, risk, and value than any classroom ever could. By 24, I touched more street corners than most realtors in the city. I knew which neighborhoods were changing, where rents were climbing, where new coffee shops replaced liquor stores, where investors weren't looking yet. I saw the shift before most people did. During my breaks, I'd sit in my car with a microwave burrito and binge YouTube videos about real estate. Flipping, wholesaling, Section 8 strategy, market cycles, I devoured it all. I took free webinars, followed local investors on Instagram, even DM'd a few just to ask questions. Most ignored me. One replied. Her name was Tanisha Lewis, a former corrections officer turned real estate beast out of Vallejo. She taught me my first lesson: credit don't matter as much as hustle. You find a deal, money will chase you. That stuck with me. I saved every dollar I could. Moved into a tiny studio in San Leandro with no AC and roaches that refused to die. I lived lean and watched my bank account grow. My siblings thought I was still broke. My mom offered to send me leftovers like I was some starving artist. I let them think what they wanted. Then, in the summer of 2020, when COVID turned the world upside down, I made my first move. A 2-bedroom duplex in Richmond went up for a foreclosure auction. Cracked foundation, busted roof, trash in every room. Most investors didn't even blink at it. I used a hard money loan and every cent I had to snatch it up. Learned to patch drywall on YouTube. Spent 2 months working on it myself. No contractors, just YouTube and elbow grease. 2 months later, I had my first tenant, and I wasn't stopping. Over the next 18 months, I picked up 3 more properties, one in East Oakland, another in Hayward, and a small triplex in Vallejo. I wasn't rich. I didn't drive a Lambo. But the cash flow was steady, and my equity was growing. Quietly. Strategically. No one in my family noticed. That was the beauty of it. While they chased applause, I was building freedom, brick by brick, street by street. Not for validation. Not to be seen. But because deep down, I knew something they didn't. The real power isn't in proving people wrong. It's in building a life so strong, you don't need to. He wasn't just gone. They made sure he left me with nothing. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I was finishing up some paperwork on a new tenant in Vallejo when Marisol called, her voice brittle and shaking. Dad's gone. Heart attack. In his sleep. I didn't even have words. Just a ringing in my ears, followed by silence that didn't go away. I drove to Mom's house in a daze. The family had already gathered, Javier pacing in the living room like he was preparing for a press conference, Marisol crying into a tissue like she'd practiced it. No one looked surprised to see me, but no one looked relieved either. I wasn't hugged. I wasn't asked how I was doing, I was just there. The funeral came fast. Catholic service. White flowers. Closed casket. My dad looked stiff even in death, like he still didn't have time for me. I stood in the second row. Javier gave the eulogy. Marisol read a poem. I wasn't asked to speak. Then came the will. I found out 2 days after the funeral that Dad had left everything, to Javier. The house in Fruitvale. His union pension. The tiny plot of land he still owned near Merced. Javier was named executor, manager, beneficiary. I got a check for $5,000 and a note that read, to help Marcus get on his feet. I was 28. I owned 4 properties. And they still thought I needed help to get on my feet. No one had even told me about the estate meeting. I found out because Marisol let it slip over dinner. They just thought you wouldn't be interested in all the paperwork, she said, sipping wine in that smug, smooth way she always did. You know how Dad was. He trusted Javier with the serious stuff. Serious stuff. Like family. Like legacy. Like deciding whether to sell the only home I ever knew. Javier didn't even bother sugarcoating it when I confronted him. It's not personal, he said. Dad just knew how you are. You. Always doing your own thing. We didn't want to burden you with responsibility. Burden me? I'd been managing rent payments from tenants in 4 cities. I was coordinating repairs, leases, inspections, alone. But somehow, I wasn't responsible enough to handle a funeral budget. I didn't argue. Didn't raise my voice. Just nodded. Took my little check. And left. But inside, something in me turned cold. Not angry, focused. I realized then that they didn't see me. Not really. They saw the Marcus they'd frozen in time, a teenage disappointment with weed in his pocket and no future. They didn't know what I was becoming. They never even asked. And maybe that was their biggest mistake. Because now, they weren't just wrong about me. They'd bet the future of our family on the one person who was about to lose it all. And I was done watching from the shadows. They never saw me rise. But I watched them fall. It started with a headline. Baples Tech faces lawsuit over data breach. Stock plummets overnight. Javier's company. The one he built his entire identity around. The same one he used to mock me from, telling me I should try building something real. At first, I thought it was a minor dip, just a hiccup in Silicon Valley's roller coaster. But 2 weeks later, they froze the company's assets. The board ousted Javier. Investors wanted blood. He went from flying first class to posting cryptic quotes about resilience and new chapters on Instagram. The Tesla got returned. His luxury condo in Emeryville hit the market faster than the ink could dry on the resignation letter. The worst part? He tried to pretend like none of it was happening. Meanwhile, Marisol's fairy tale cracked too. Her husband, Dr. Aiden Patel, Mr. Perfect, filed for divorce out of nowhere. Left her for a nurse in her 20s and took the joint account with him. Marisol spiraled. Spa days turned into stress rashes. She moved out of their townhome in San Jose and back into Mom's spare bedroom, acting like she was just helping out for a bit. Suddenly, the golden children looked a little tarnished. Family dinners got quieter. No one asked about careers. No one laughed too loud. And for the first time in my life, no one had a single jab for me. They couldn't. Because while their castles were collapsing, mine was growing. I just closed on my 6th rental, an ugly but sturdy duplex in East Oakland. My tenants were stable, my cash flow was solid, and I had a down payment ready for my next one in San Leandro. I wasn't flashy about it. Still wore the same hoodies, drove the same Corolla. But everything had changed, and they could feel it. Javier started texting me randomly. Yo, you ever invest in short-term rentals? You got a good CPA? I might need to restructure some stuff. He never said the words, but I knew what he meant. I'm struggling. I don't know how to fix this. Can you help me? Marisol was more subtle. Do you know any affordable apartments near Fremont? God, rent prices are insane right now. How do people even survive? I wanted to say they survive by not marrying egomaniacs or betting everything on a fragile company, but I held my tongue. Let them talk. Let them squirm. They were falling apart, and for once, I wasn't the one breaking. They'd spent years pretending I didn't exist, making me the joke, the failure, the black sheep. But now they were sinking. And the only person with a life raft was the one they pushed overboard years ago. I didn't celebrate their pain. I'm not built like that. But I'll be honest, I watched it all unfold with the calm, patient satisfaction of someone who already knew they were never as untouchable as they thought. Funny how their voices change when they need you. The first message came from Marisol. It was a text, short, polite, careful. Hey, Marcus. I hope you're doing well. Just wondering if you know any landlords in the Fremont area open to flexible deposits. I'm figuring things out. I stared at the screen for a long time before responding. Not because I didn't have answers, hell, I owned a place 5 minutes from where she was probably crashing with Mom, but because it felt like I was watching the universe reverse itself. The same sister who once told me to get serious about my life was now asking me for help just to have a roof over her head. Javier followed a few days later, just as cautiously. Yo, man. You got a few minutes to chat about business stuff? Could use your perspective on some real estate plays. Business stuff. This from the guy who used to call my early investments penny hustles and laughed when I showed him a photo of my first rehab project. I didn't respond right away. Not because I was petty, but because I wanted to make sure I wasn't reacting from ego. A younger version of me might have sent screenshots of my bank balance just to prove a point. But now, I had more to lose than prove, so I called Javier back. We kept it surface level at first. Talked about markets, rental trends, how the city was shifting again post-COVID. But beneath his words, they used to laugh at me. Now they can't look me in the eye. I sent the invites out like it was no big deal. Come by for dinner, I texted. Saturday, 6 p.m. Bring an appetite. Simple. Casual. No pressure. Just family. But when Marisol pulled up in her used Camry and Javier stepped out of an Uber, I saw it hit them, the view. My home sat near the top of the Oakland hills, just high enough that the city looked like a painting stretched beneath us. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the bay like it belonged to me. It was peaceful, modern, and nothing like the person they thought I'd become. Damn! Javier muttered, wide-eyed. Taking in the sleek black Range Rover in the driveway, the soft-lit entrance, the tall glass front door. This is yours? I smiled. Yep. Picked it up earlier this year. Good investment. Marisol didn't say a word. Her eyes just scanned everything, the marble countertops, the custom lighting, the minimalist furniture that looked straight out of Architectural Digest. She clutched her knockoff purse like it suddenly didn't belong in the room. I led them out to the back patio where the city lights danced across the water. Dinner was already set. A private chef I'd hired for the night served lemon garlic salmon, roasted vegetables, and wine older than the jokes they used to make about me. We made small talk. Javier asked about market trends. Marisol complimented the lighting. But the air was thick with the one thing no one could say: you were right. We were wrong. I watched them squirm between sips of wine. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I just let the silence do the talking. After dessert, I leaned back in my chair and looked at them. You know, I said, voice calm, I used to dream about this moment. They looked up, unsure where I was going. All those years you talked down to me. Mocked me. Treated me like I was wasting time. I kept thinking, one day they'll see. Not because I needed validation, but because I wanted this. Not the house. Not the view. But this peace. Marisol shifted in her seat. Javier looked down at his empty plate. I'm not bitter, I added. But I'd be lying if I said this didn't feel like closure. No one spoke. Not right away. Eventually, Marisol whispered, we didn't know. You didn't ask to know, I replied. But it's fine. You're here now. And that was it. No shouting. No dramatic mic drop. Just truth served cold, in a house built on silence, sweat, and self-belief. They used to laugh at me. Roll their eyes. Shrug me off like a stain on their perfect lives. Now? They were sitting at my table, in my home, eating my food, and for the first time in years. They had nothing to say. You called me a failure. Now I'm your future. The silence after dinner was heavy, one of those moments where the air feels thick, like the room itself is waiting for something to happen. Marisol sat staring into her wineglass. Javier tapped his fork against his plate, avoiding eye contact. The weight of everything left unsaid hovered between us. I stood up slowly and walked over to the edge of the patio. The Bay Bridge lit up in the distance like a constellation I had somehow earned. I turned around, leaned against the railing, and looked at the two people who had once made me feel invisible. I know you're both going through it, I began. I know it's been rough. Losing the house. The company. The marriage. I've been there, in a different way. Javier looked up, eyes heavy with a pride he didn't know where to put. Marisol stayed quiet, her lips pressed tight like she was holding in a confession. I want you to understand something, I said, my voice steady. I'm not here to rub anything in. I'm not looking for an apology, or some grand moment of recognition. I paused, letting the quiet stretch just enough to be uncomfortable. But I remember. I remember every time I sat at that dinner table and got mocked for working deliveries. Every joke about how I'd never make it. Every time I got left out of decisions, funeral plans, family investments, birthday parties like I didn't even count. I let that sink in, and still, I continued, I'm willing to help. Marisol blinked. Javier furrowed his brow. You could see the confusion settle on both their faces like fog. Why? Marisol finally asked. Her voice was hoarse, softer than I'd ever heard it. Because I refused to become what you were to me, I answered. Cold. Dismissive. Arrogant. I've worked too hard to let bitterness define me now. I walked back to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat across from them. You need a place to stay, Marisol? I've got units in Fremont and Hayward. First month's rent is on me. No security deposit. She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. Javier? You want to rebuild? I'm opening a new property management branch. I need someone who knows systems, finance. We can start small. Contract work. If you prove yourself, maybe more. He looked like he didn't know whether to say thank you or cry. So he just nodded. But let's be real, I said. I'm not doing this because you deserve it. I'm doing it because I've changed. And because someone in this family has to break the cycle. I leaned back and looked at both of them. You called me a failure. Now I'm your future. And for the first time ever, I saw it. The moment they realized they had finally, truly underestimated the wrong man. I didn't need revenge. I had something better, power with mercy. I didn't just survive. I rose. And I never had to become them to win. 6 months later, the air feels different. I wake up in the Oakland hills, sunlight pouring through windows I once dreamed about, in a home that stands as proof of everything I built in silence. No alarm. No scramble. Just peace. It's funny how things shift. Javier now works for me, not as a favor, but because he earned it. I gave him a shot managing tenant relations and property maintenance across my East Bay units. At first, he fumbled. Pride will do that to a man. But little by little, he humbled himself. Showed up early. Asked questions. Took notes. We don't talk about the past much, but sometimes I catch him staring at me with something close to respect. And Marisol? She's settled into one of my Fremont townhomes with her daughter, Luna. Yeah, turned out she was pregnant when Aiden walked out. She never told anyone until after the dinner. That changed everything. I didn't ask questions. Just handed her a set of keys and said, "You and the baby are safe here." Now I visit twice a week, sometimes with groceries, sometimes just to hold the baby while she finishes dishes. Marisol doesn't say thank you every time anymore, she just shows it in the way her shoulders have softened, in how she looks me in the eye like she finally sees me. And Mom? I moved her out of that aging Fruitvale house with the sagging roof and bought her a single-level ranch-style home in Castro Valley. Quiet neighborhood. Big backyard. Safe. She cried when I handed her the deed, mumbling, "You didn't have to do this." But I did, not for approval. Not even for forgiveness, because it was never about proving them wrong, it was about doing what was right. Even when they didn't, they called me the black sheep. Treated me like I didn't belong in the family's picture. But now, I'm the one keeping the picture from falling apart. Not out of revenge. Out of choice. People like to think revenge is loud, explosive. But sometimes it's quiet. It's in the way you hold the door open for those who slammed it on you. It's in the grace you offer when you could have chosen vengeance. I don't need their apologies. I don't need a rewrite of history, because I own my history, every slight, every insult. Every time they overlooked me, I turned it into fuel. And now, I'm not just surviving, I'm leading. I've become the shepherd of the forgotten, the one they wrote off, who now writes the checks. The one they counted out, who now holds the ledger. And the best part, I never had to become cold or cruel like they were. I didn't just rise. I rose better.